What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jared Speaks, episode 22. Before we get into today's topic, I want to take a few minutes to just talk to you straight because I think it's worth saying out loud. The numbers have been climbing, not in some massive viral way. I know that it's not 100 views or 1,000 or 1,000,000, but the views and listeners that I have been getting is real to me. It's mine, and I'm genuinely happy with it. Here's the thing I've been setting with, though. I'm trying my hardest not to watch those numbers closely. I glance at them when I upload a new episode and the list pops up. I notice them ticking up a little. I will write the description, put a title, and close the tab, and that's it. That's as far as I let myself go with it. And I want to be honest about why. If I build this whole thing on watching numbers climb, then the day they stop, if they stop climbing, or the day they drop, or if they drop, I'm not sure what's left holding the show together. I want to keep doing this regardless of what the numbers say. That is the goal. But I'd be lying to you if I said it does not matter to me at all whether anyone is actually out there listening. Today, I want to ask you something directly, and I genuinely want the answer. Where are you listening to this from? I picture it sometimes. Somebody in their car on the drive home from work, or on the way in from work. Somebody lying in bed at night who finally put the phone down from doom scrolling and hit play on something real instead. I have no idea if that's even close or accurate, so tell me. Drop it in the comments. Wherever you're listening from, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, YouTube, wherever this found you, I want to know. I want to talk about something that surprised me through this whole process. Out of everywhere I post this show, TikTok has become the place where I feel the most free. The comments on Spotify have been quiet so far, and Facebook has not really taken off the way that I hoped. But TikTok has been something else entirely. People liking the clips, sure, but more than that, people reaching out, talking to me about spirituality, telling me about their own Kundalini awakening experiences, engaging with the actual content of what I'm saying instead of just scrolling past it. And here's what gets me about that. For most of my life, I believed that if I talked about what I actually wanted to talk about, the deep stuff, the consciousness stuff, the unseen parts of being human, nobody would care. So I learned to talk about what I thought other people wanted to hear instead. We have covered that on this show before, the mirror thing, adjusting to fit whatever room I was in, even changing the way I talked depending on where I was living at the time. TikTok has been proof that the belief I carried for so long was wrong. I hit the plus sign. I talk about whatever's actually on my mind that day, and people show up for it. Not because I'm performing something for them, because I'm finally just being myself out loud. And it turns out that does not drain me the way performing always did. If you found this podcast through TikTok, I want to hear that too. Drop it in the comments. Did a video pop up on your feed? Did a friend send it to you? Did somebody in your family say you need to hear this? I'm genuinely curious how people are finding their way here. I want to be honest about something because I do not want to give you a version of this that is not true. This show does not come out of me fully unscripted. I read from prepared scripts most of the time, organized ahead of recording. That is the actual process. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise just because spontaneity might sound more impressive. What I want to say instead is this: having that structure has given me something I did not expect. A lot of what lives in my head moves fast and tangled. Half formed thoughts, things I feel before I have words for them. Sitting down, working through an idea, and ending up with something organized enough to read out loud has been its own kind of relief. It's not that the thinking happens live on the page, it's that the thinking gets a place to land instead of just circling forever. So, whatever this show ends up being for other people, I think it has already become something real for me. A place where the things rattling around in my head get organized into something I can actually hand to somebody else. Maybe that counts as the point too, alongside whatever it does for you listening. I want to be honest about something else. We have covered a lot of ground around consciousness and the human mind over these 22 episodes. The filter, the ego, the shadow, metacognition, intuition, and the inner voice we are getting into today. And I love this territory. I do not think I am done with it. But I also know there's only so much I can keep circling around the same core idea before it starts to feel like I'm just rephrasing the same episode with a different title. So I want to hear from you on this one. I want your help. If there's something in the same general territory, still about the mind, still about consciousness, still about the unseen parts of being human, or even a related branch of that, something I have not touched yet, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments. What do you want to see covered? What question has been setting in the back of your mind that you've never had a place to ask out loud? This show has gone in directions I did not plan more than once because somebody said something that cracked a door open. I would love for that to keep happening. All right, let's get into today's topic because I think it ties directly into everything we just talked about. I was talking to someone close to me about the voice in your head not being you. Something we have covered a lot on this show. The idea that the inner critic and the running commentary are not actually the real you, just a pattern your mind learned to run. And she told me something that stopped me completely. She says she does not really have thoughts the way I do. No constant narration. No voice running in the background commenting on her day. Rehearsing what to say next. Replaying conversations and actual words. At first, that was just confusing to me. I genuinely could not picture what that would even be like. How do you plan your day without saying it to yourself in your head? How do you work through a problem without an internal back and forth happening? My entire experience of thinking has always had words attached to it, almost like a constant conversation with myself that never fully stops, even right now while I am talking to you. And then I got curious. If the tools I usually offer on this show for working through tough emotions, question the voice, separate from the voice, notice when the voice is lying to you, all depend on there being a voice in the first place. What happens for someone whose mind does not work that way at all? What do you even offer them instead? That question is what turned it into this whole episode. I want to be clear that what I'm describing is not some fringe idea I picked up on secondhand. It is something psychologists and researchers have actually studied for decades, and it became a much bigger public conversation a few years back when a wave of posts went semi viral with people discovering in real time that not everyone around them experiences thought the same way they do. People were genuinely shocked. Arguments broke out online between people, insisting everyone obviously has an inner voice, and people insisting just as strongly that they've never had one in their life. The technical term researchers use for that internal narration is inner speech. I call it the mind voice. One of the most thorough researchers in this area, a psychologist named Russell Hurlburt, spent decades developing a method called descriptive experiences sampling, where people carry a small device that beeps randomly throughout the day. And in the moment it beeps, they write down exactly what's happening in their mind right at that instant, before they have time to reconstruct or edit it into something tidier than it actually was. What research found over and over across a large number of people is that inner experience varies enormously from person to person. Some people report inner speech running almost constantly. Some report it rarely or almost never. And inner speech is just one category Hurlburt identified. People also reported that what he called inner seeing, I call that the mind's eye, meaning visual imagery in the mind, plus feelings, unsymbolized thinking, which is a kind of thought that has no words or images attached to it at all. Just a direct sense of knowing something. And general sensory awareness. Different people lean heavily into different combinations of these, and almost nobody experiences exactly the same mix as anybody else. I think that last part is worth sitting with for a second. Hurlburt was not finding two categories of people, inner voice or no inner voice. He was finding an enormous range, with most people landing somewhere in a unique combination of all five of these categories, weighted differently person to person. There is a related but separate phenomenon I think is worth bringing in here, because it shows how different inner experience can belong can be along a whole other dimension. In 2015, a researcher named Adam Zeman and his colleagues gave a name to something that turned out to affect a meaningful proportion of the population: aphantasia, the inability to voluntarily create mental images. If you ask someone with aphantasia to picture an apple in their mind, they cannot actually see anything. They might know facts about an apple, know it is red, know its shape, but there's no visual image forming behind their eyes the way there is for most people. On the complete opposite end, the same research identified hyperphantasia, where mental imagery is not just present but extremely vivid, sometimes described as nearly indistinguishable from actually seeing something with your eyes open. People with hyperphantasia have described being able to essentially relieve a memory visually with the same intensity as the original moment. Here's what I find genuinely fascinating. Inner speech and mental imagery are separate systems. You can have a strong inner voice and no mental imagery at all. You can have vivid mental imagery and no inner voice at all. You can have both running strong, or neither, or any combination in between. Four completely different ways of experiencing your own mind from the inside. And that is before you even account for how much of those can vary in intensity from one person to the next, or how much they can shift for the same person depending on what they are thinking about. This is where it gets practically important, not just interesting to think about. If someone has a strong inner voice, a sort of help language makes intuitive sense to them. Talk back to the voice. Question what it is telling you. Notice when it is being unkind and choose different words. All of that assumes there are words to work with in the first place. For someone without an inner narration, all of that advice can land as confusing or even alienating because it is describing an experience they simply do not have. That does not mean they do not process emotions or work through problems. It means they are likely doing it through a different channel entirely. Feelings that arrive without words attached. A sense of rightness or wrongness about a decision that does not get translated into an internal sentence. Images, if they have a strong visual imagery, that carry meaning without needing to be narrated at all. I think this matters for how we talk to other people in our lives. If you offer someone a tool built entirely around an inner voice and they do not have one, it is not that the tool failed them personally. It is that the tool was never built for their kind of mind to begin with. That reframe alone has changed how I think about giving advice to people. I cannot assume my mental toolkit translates automatically into someone else's head. I want to share something small but interesting that came out of this. When I started paying attention to this in my own life, I found that two of my kids and my mom all describe having both a strong inner voice and a strong mental image, what people sometimes call the mind's eye. like me, when they think. I do not know what to make of that beyond just nothing. It could be coincidence. It could be something that runs in families to some degree. And honestly, the research on whether or how strongly this is inherited is still developing. I'm not making a scientific claim here. I just thought it was worth mentioning as a small, real observation rather than leaving it out. I want to connect this back to the bigger thread this show keeps circling because I think it belongs here. We have talked about whether consciousness is something the brain produces or something the brain receives, like a radio picking up a signal. We've talked about how the brain filters reality, how memory reconstructs itself every time it gets recalled, how different nervous systems process the same world in completely different ways. The inner voice question is maybe the most direct, personal version of that whole conversation because it asks something almost nobody stops to ask. Not what do you think, but how do you think? What does the actual texture of being you on the inside in this exact moment feel like? And the honest answer is that it is probably more different from person to person than most of us ever imagine. Right up until somebody describes their inner world out loud and it does not match yours at all. I want to hear from you on this one. Do you have a constant inner voice? Or none at all? Or something in between? Do you see images clearly in your mind? Vaguely or not at all? And if you've ever found out someone close to you experiences their own mind completely differently than what you do, what was that conversation like? And separately, where are you listening from right now? How did you find the show? And if there is a topic in the same general territory that you want me to dig into next, tell me that too. I read every single one of these comments. That is episode 22, everybody. Such a simple question. Do you hear a voice in your head? With such a wide range of answers once you actually start asking people. I think that says something important about how careful we should be assuming anyone's inner world and what it looks like. And that it doesn't look anything like our own. Follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, or YouTube. Leave a rating if you can. Share this one with somebody and ask them straight up whether they hear a voice in their head. You might be surprised by the answer. New episode tomorrow. Stay curious. Take care of yourselves. I will talk to you then.